more information in regards to the crypto space and Bitcoin in general. So this is actually, it's on its 4th year now. And just over the fall last year, I was able to collaborate with the Brampton Library, specifically this Chinguacousy branch. So that was a fantastic plus because they've given me space to host Bitcoin meetups once a month. So this is what we're doing here and why we're here. And yeah, there's also some support from the city of Brampton with this organization or group. So if this is something you want to get into in the future, just talking about Bitcoin, then you're at the right place. But anyways, the reason why we're here today is talk about Bitcoin and have questions answered. So the goal today is just ask as many questions as you can that if you had something on your mind that you wanted to get answered, just throw it out there, and 9 times out of 10 I'll be able to answer it. 99% of the time I'll be able to answer it, but if not, I'll find an answer for you. But anyways, we'll focus on, I'll have this up here, 7 players on the network, and these are all the actors on the Bitcoin network. So that's what Bitcoin is in a nutshell. It's a currency and a network. And we have all these 7 different players and actors on the network. And they all have to act in consensus. They all have to act together. And this has never been done before. We've always had to rely on a third party when it comes to governance of networks. So that's a fascinating thing about Bitcoin, is that it's able to kind of run itself. It's a trustless network. You just you put your trust in the network to do its job, and that's what it does. It does that through computer code, so algorithms, software, and everybody has to trust each other. So it's very, very neat and very fascinating. Bitcoin's been out since 2009, and since the beginning, it's gone through a lot of ups and downs, but it's still here, and it's actually stronger than ever because of its nature being decentralized. Where did I put the marker? The black marker.
It dropped. Right there.
Oh, it dropped.
So,
Yeah.
how do you get back cash after you have Bitcoin?
I'll tell you. I'll answer that. So I think the reason why it's been around so long is because it has those characteristics. It's decentralized, which means nobody owns it, nobody controls it. It's a distributed computer network across the world. So if you try and shut down one computer, half of the computers, you can't do it. You have to shut down all of them. It's also open source, which means it's free to build on top of. A lot of software these days is closed source, and there's not much room to work with the developers in that sense, whereas the Bitcoin network is open source, which means anybody can build on it and anyone can make it better, and that's what we've seen happen. And then the last one is it's voluntary, which means you're not forced. It's opt-in, so it's your choice. If you want to join the network and use the network, nobody's forcing you to. So yeah, on this network, what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin is all of these players. You have developers who are the ones doing the coding, creating the software to make Bitcoin better, more secure, more safer, more easier to use for people. Right now, Bitcoin is still in the store of value stage. That's actually another one I have to write down. It's not meant to be used as a medium of exchange. I wouldn't recommend spending Bitcoin right now. It's just not meant to be used that way. It's better for saving right now rather than sending. You can send Bitcoins, no problem, but it'll be a lot more cheaper in the future, and the network will be more scaled to handle the amount of transactions on a global scale, kind of like Visa. So right now it's still working on developing the right tech to become a medium of exchange, but right now it's great as a store of value. And then the last function of money is unit of account. which is pricing things. And I think naturally that's where Bitcoin will progress to and will replace, well, who knows what the world reserve currency is right now, today.
US?
Yeah.
USD?
It's US dollar. All other currencies and assets have to base their value off of the US dollar. Does anybody know who controls the US dollar, like the printing of it?
The Federal Reserve?
Yes, it's the Federal Reserve, which is actually a private organization. So they control the supply of the US dollar, and if, I don't know, if you've been on the internet lately, you might have found out that they print a lot of this money, and while it may benefit them, it's not beneficial for everybody else. And so we should kind of see a problem with that. Just to kind of give you an example, gold used to be the world's reserve currency, but there were actually paper money that existed at the time that was considered, I want to say gold was the best store of value, but say 500 years ago, there were other paper currencies, like Spanish, dollar, Portuguese, that were the world's reserve currency instead of the US dollar. So if you had $100 worth of gold back then versus $100 in paper money, today the gold is going to be worth way more than that paper money would have ever been worth. But we've still used paper money to be world reserve currencies, and it just gets you to thinking, you know, like, who controls this money? Why aren't we benefiting from it? And that's why I got into Bitcoin. It's independent from anything like that, and I really feel, and a lot of people are seeing, that it benefits everybody who uses the network, and it's built that way as well, is that it benefits everyone, and I'll get into that in a little more detail on how that's done, but it's involving all the players on the network working together as a team. So to answer your question, since yours was the first question, how do you get cash in Bitcoins? So there are exchanges that you go to. There are different types of exchanges. There are centralized exchanges where you have to give up your personal information, and some people find it better because you get a little bit cheaper prices there, but there's a lot more problems that I've heard in terms of withdrawals, security. That's a big one, because with centralized exchanges, they have custodial wallets, and they kind of force people to hold their coins on exchanges, and that's at risk of being hacked. Exchanges are online, and if they know people are holding their Bitcoins on exchanges, it's more susceptible to being hacked or compromise the exchange. And we've seen that happen before, whereas it doesn't happen at all with peer-to-peer exchanges, because most of those people, they take their Bitcoins off the exchange and they put them into their own Bitcoin wallet. So you have wallet providers. You can go on your phone right now, your iPhone, your Android, and just type in Bitcoin wallet, and you'll see different Bitcoin wallets, and they're all free. There's some wallet providers that are hardware wallet providers, but that costs like $100, $200, $300, and it allows you to hold Bitcoins offline. But there's solutions to having a wallet on your phone where you can still kind of keep some of it offline, or most of it offline, and maybe even never ever have to bring it online, but that's neither here nor there. So most people, they put their Bitcoins, or they take their Bitcoins off the exchange and they hold them in their own wallets. So I recommend peer-to-peer exchanges because it's safer and you don't have to give up all your personal information, like just an email, and it's your choice what you want to use. You can set up your bank account if you like, or you can just do e-transfers or cash deposits where you walk into a bank account, do a cash deposit into an account, and once the person knows that you get the money, they'll send you Bitcoins. But there's escrow involved in that whole system. Who here has heard of escrow? Nobody's heard of escrow? Like, you know when you make a transaction just to make sure it's safe? Okay, well, escrow is basically having an arbitrary third party involved in the transaction to make sure everything happens okay. So that's what localbitcoins.com does.
Hold on, I'm still a little bit confused.
What's that? What are you confused about?
So, like these exchanges, right?
Right.
Like where do I find these exchanges?
Just go to the website, localbitcoins.com. They even have an app, Local Bitcoin. And yeah, once you're ready to buy, you just
No, but not if you're trying to buy, what if you're trying to sell something?
same thing. So you would have
Yeah,
to, if you're trying to sell Bitcoin, you'd have to put Bitcoins on the exchange, right?
Yeah.
So you would
It's
have.
it's on the Bitcoin website? Is it on the Bitcoin website you said?
Yeah, so that's where the exchange will be on the website. So you're saying if you have Bitcoins in your own wallet and you want to sell them, you'll then have to send them to the exchange. So this is what I'm talking about, localbitcoins.com. They have a temporary wallet for you there to hold your Bitcoin. But once you're done with the transactions, it's highly recommended to take them off the exchange and hold them into your own wallet. It's more secure that way, and they're actually, if your Bitcoins are on the exchange and it's in a custodial wallet, they're technically not yours unless you have them in your own wallet. It's because owning Bitcoin, it's like owning a certificate, a digitally signed certificate. So you have a private key and a public key to send Bitcoins, but to own them, you have to have that private key. If you have them on the exchange, you don't have the private key and they're not considered yours. You can keep them on the exchange. Like honestly, Local Bitcoins is pretty good. That's why it's probably safer to keep your coins on a peer-to-peer exchange rather than a centralized one. But still, just get used to holding them in your own wallet. Yes.
So if for example, when you have US dollar,
Correct.
the government ensures that the money will be given to you, even if they don't have money. But Bitcoin, like who guarantees it? Like for example, if I have Canadian dollar, the government ensures that that money is mine, and they have a signature. Even the government gets default, I have that value.
Yeah.
But in Bitcoin, how is someone accountable? Like so hard.
So I guess to answer your question, it would be the network. Like Bitcoin, it's a public network, and anyone can go on the public network. You can go on, they're called block explorers, where you can search and you can see all the transactions happening at the same time that happen on the Bitcoin network. And you can see there, and on your block explorer, who your Bitcoins were sent to, how much you had at the time, but there's also different privacy aspects to kind of hide how much you have and whatnot. But anyways, it's the network that does that provides that kind of security to you, that assurance. And I think what you're asking for is, can that money be double spent? Like with paper money, it can be double spent. Like I know people feel like it is insured, but it doesn't matter if they control it and they can double spend it. But with Bitcoin, there's only 21 million Bitcoins. There'll never be more than that. So you can see on the network, by going on this public ledger, how many Bitcoins are, like where they are. You can't see exactly who owns what, but you can get a good idea for where they are. And so the nodes and the miners, they're the ones that verify transactions on the Bitcoin network. So if I make a transaction to you, I send Bitcoin to you, I have to propagate to the Bitcoin network that we're making a transaction. It's all done through computers, but the transaction will only be a success if it gets confirmed by the network. So that's kind of how you get that assurance, and it's just a matter of time. Blocks. Like who's heard of the term blockchain? Has anyone heard of the term blockchain yet? Yeah. So that's what another term for the Bitcoin network. It's called the blockchain. So that's literally what it is, a chain of blocks. And each 10 minutes, all the transactions that happen on the Bitcoin network are put into these blocks. So each 10 minutes, these blocks have to get verified, and they're verified by the nodes and the miners. So it's essentially the other people on the network who are doing the verifying for you. Does that kind of answer your question?
So there's no one person or one organization responsible for that?
No, everybody. It's really miners and nodes. These are the ones who provide what you're looking at, that kind of accounting. That's essentially what this example is. It's an example of a triple entry bookkeeping system. Usually we've always used double entry bookkeeping and had to rely on third parties. And that's how banks got started, credit cards got started. But this is the one time where you actually just trust the network and your peers to verify that the blockchain is what it is. For example, to become a node and to verify each block, you have to download the whole history of the blockchain, and I think it's somewhere around 15 gigabytes now. I'm not sure, but this downloads the history of the blockchain, and you have the history of all the transactions that happen on the Bitcoin network. So you're verifying, these nodes and miners are literally verifying the state of the network every 10 minutes. If they see that a transaction is maybe it's double spent, it won't get verified by the network.
So it's anyone can make a cryptocurrency then. Bitcoin is just a kind of cryptocurrency, right?
Yes.
So like recently Canon also, they started their own.
Which one are you referring to?
Canon, they started similar to Bitcoin.
Like what's it called?
I don't remember what it's called.
Okay, because I've heard of two in the past. One called Mint Chip,
Okay.
and the other one CAD Coin. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but see, this is the thing. You'll see that happen, and you're already kind of starting to see that happen, especially with the Ethereum network. Have you heard of the Ethereum network? So it's basically, it's also a network that has a currency on it, like Bitcoin, but you can create your own blockchains with Ethereum, so your own private blockchain. So you're starting to see all the banks around the world and governments around the world get all excited with the Ethereum network because you can create your own private blockchains with your own identity systems, blah, blah, blah. But still to this day, it's never had the same network effect as Bitcoin. Like all the network effects, just look at the price and look at the security of it. Like there's no long-term scalability. There's no real good developers developing on it. Whereas Bitcoin has the best developers in the world all the time working on it. And at the beginning, they started doing it for free by themselves because they just wanted an alternative form of money. And there's actually some history before Bitcoin of different kinds of digital currencies. This was just kind of all the best ideas put together, and it actually works. So that's why the best ones in the world are working on the Bitcoin network. But there's still some talented ones working on Ethereum, but I guess it depends on your personal preference. So yeah, did that answer your question about how to cash out with Bitcoins? So you just gotta take your Bitcoins from your wallet, put it on an exchange like localbitcoins.com, and then you find a buyer, and they buy it from you. But like I was mentioning, they have an escrow system set up. So once you find a vendor or a buyer, you start the trade, and only once the trade is completed properly, then the Bitcoins are released and everybody gets paid. I've never had a problem, I've never heard of a problem through local Bitcoins with the escrow system. They've been absolutely fantastic. If you go online and you search cities, countries that have banned Bitcoin, well, you can't really ban Bitcoin, so ban exchanges, you'll see the volume on local Bitcoins skyrocket in the next however long they've banned Bitcoin for on those exchanges. Is because it's an alternative. It's the peer-to-peer exchange. It's not centralized. You don't have to give any information. So a lot of people flock to local Bitcoins, and they've done that over the years. So it's been by far the best. There's also Paxful.com, which is another great peer-to-peer exchange for buying and selling Bitcoin. Yeah. Any other questions?
So they can identify who owns Bitcoin, or like why is like all international smugglers or hijackers, they always require Bitcoin? That's how they get the ransom nowadays.
Yeah, well, they've used cash before, right? It's the same thing. So it's actually harder to trace cash as it is for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's actually easier depending on who's using it. See, that's the neat thing with the Bitcoin network is there's services that are coming about that provide a certain sense of anonymity and just security in general when you use Bitcoins. Like for example, the company I work for, Samurai Wallet, they do a lot to protect your privacy and provide a sense of security and sort of anonymity when you transact on the Bitcoin network. So depending on who you are and which services you use when you transact on the Bitcoin network, you can sort of be tracked, and they can see, okay, I know that this person sent the Bitcoins because it's all connected. But depending on the services you use, yeah, it can be a lot harder, but With cash, I'd say it was quite a lot harder before, because you can just do a person-to-person trade, like in person, there's no third party necessary. So, and I mean, to kind of elaborate on that a little more, criminals are always going to be the ones to use the fringe technology. They're always going to be the first ones. It even happened with cars. They were the first ones to use it. So it's just natural, but I mean, they're using the tools available they have just to survive. But I think actually, like thinking long term, I think the system that we currently live in, it kind of promotes crime to happen, because we're always competing with each other. Like the US dollar is competing with China, everybody's competing with each other. And if you have that type of network where everybody's competing with each other, you're never trying to kind of build a long-term solution. You're always just trying to beat the other person, or you're always just trying to survive. Whereas with Bitcoin, you kind of are incentivized to not compete, and you're kind of incentivized to collaborate and work with your peers. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but that's kind of how I see the Bitcoin network playing out. Any other questions?
So you said there are just 21,000 Bitcoins.
21 million Bitcoin.
21 million.
Yeah, and over half have already been distributed actually. So that's why you've seen the price go up, especially a lot over the past fall and winter, because the price, the supply and demand were kind of, so the supply was diminishing and the demand was increasing. So that's why we saw a big run up in price. But since then it's corrected. So now it's around, I think, 9,000 Canadian dollars, 10,000.
10,000 for one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It used to be $800 a couple of years back, like 2000.
Not that long ago. I remember last year in 2017, it was like $1,700 US, and I was telling my work buddies that I no longer work with anymore that you guys should look into Bitcoin, you should just start investing in it. And they always kind of pushed me away, no. But by the end of that year, last year, it was at 20,000, around 20,000. And it's since, like I said, it's done a price correction. But that's not the biggest price correction. For example, the first and biggest price correction with Bitcoin was when it was $30 and it dropped to $1. And then the second one was when it went from $1,200 to $200. So they're actually getting less, the crashes over time. But yeah, 21 million, and over half have already been distributed. And the way they're distributed, do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
So you have like a point something
Okay,
something of a
yeah.
share?
You don't have to have one whole Bitcoin. You don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. You can buy 0.1 Bitcoin. It's actually to 1 million decimal places. So, but the way they're distributed it's through the network. So these nodes, they're the ones kind of propagating the network, the transactions. So these nodes kind of say, hey, and it's through an algorithm. They give a reward to the network. It's basically a problem, and whichever computer solves that problem first gets a reward. In 2009, the reward was 50 Bitcoins to solve that computer problem. And back then, you could mine from your laptop. Like if I had a laptop, I had enough computer power at the time to have a chance at getting that reward of 50 Bitcoin. But now today, if you are trying to mine on your computer, you have no chance. You need more computer power in order to have a better chance of winning that reward. So there's actually huge farms, like warehouses full of miners that try and mine these Bitcoin. And so yeah, it's essentially like playing the lottery. These miners are kind of playing the lottery, and the more computer power they use, the better chance they have of getting that reward. But there's also, miners also get fees as incentive to keep using that computer power to try and solve that problem. It's called proof of work. That's the algorithm that's used to create this problem that the computer is trying to solve. So it started at 50, and every 4 years that reward was halved from 25 to now 12.5. I believe that's where we're at. Very soon we'll be going to 7 something. And the whole point of that, starting at 50, getting halved every 4 years, is to sort of provide a deflationary currency, if you think about it. And since that time, the computer power has only gotten bigger and bigger. If you think about, well, if you kind of see on a graph and you use numbers, there's a certain number that the Bitcoin network has in terms of energy it provides through these miners trying to solve this problem. And it's massive, it's now massive, the amount of computer power that's used on the Bitcoin network to try and get that reward. But at the same time, these rewards, or these miners, they help verify transactions as well, and they also help provide a sense of security to the network. So in terms of security on the internet, whenever you try and kind of hack a system, it's always through force. So you're always trying to use, the main one is a direct denial of service attack. And so that's just by using force, completely overpowering the network. But the Bitcoin network is so secure, now it's impossible to overpower. Because of all the cumulative power that's been put onto the blockchain through this mining, through this proof of work, it's now impossible. You have to rewrite the whole history. And that's another fascinating thing, is that you have those miners using computer power to try and figure out that problem, that reward. So these miners have incentive through that reward and also fees whenever you make transactions on the network. Yeah, I'd say, does that explain how it kind of gets distributed? Okay. Hi there. I remember you came a couple.
Oh, yes, I actually visited, but I didn't stay for the whole session. That's why I'm here today, to learn more about the Bitcoin Meetup.
That's cool. We were just asking questions, whatever questions you might have had on your mind. The whole point is just to ask them, and we help answer them. So if ever you have any questions, just blurt them out, and that's what we've been kind of doing. So if anyone has any more questions. Yeah.
So like you said 21 million Bitcoins, eh? So they're not making more than that, that's it, eh?
Perfect mathematical digital scarcity.
But you said US currency, the federal government is making it. So what ratio they make it? Like how, they keep on printing, there should be some formula or ratio to make it.
Exactly, you would think so, right? But because it's a private organization working with the banks, they just loan it out to the banks at 0% interest, but everybody else has to suffer and whatnot. There is no system, there is no governance system there, whereas with Bitcoin, everybody knows what's going on. So the whole network has to agree that the state of the blockchain is the way it is, otherwise your transaction's not getting accepted into the network. So yeah, with US dollar there is no way, you know, that's the frustrating thing, is banks have always been able to kind of benefit while everybody else has had to suffer. And if you kind of see over time, it's really had an effect. But right now we're lucky, we live in Canada, we don't see the effects right away. But if you're living in Venezuela right now, or Greece, and these places, their paper money is worth nothing. You have to have like shopping carts full of cash just to buy some bread or something like that. And that's an example of kind of printing too much money where everybody else has to base their value off the US dollar. There's this chart I used to use, but it's crazy, like the amount of US money that started to get printing. That's actually why Bitcoin came out in October 2008, the white paper was released, and if you look on the blockchain, there's actually a message in the first transaction, and it had to do with the banks printing too much money, and so that's why this network got started. That's what the network is, it's a protocol. So somebody wrote, it's called a white paper, somebody wrote some computer software and said, here's a protocol that uses these algorithms, and it's digital cash. And they released it freely on a cryptographer mailing list in 2008. And they used the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, but nobody knows if it was a person or a group. Still to this day, they remain anonymous. And yeah, they just freely gave it away. And some people kind of laughed at it first, like the internet, nobody took it seriously at first, but then a couple of smart people kind of looked into it and started using it and developing on it, and we're here where we are today. It's to kind of compare it to something, and the reason why I got into it, like the reason why I knew Bitcoin would still be around today. Has anyone here heard of torrents?
Yeah.
For anyone who hasn't, it's basically large file sharing. It's like Napster. Napster was the first peer-to-peer network to provide free file sharing. So it's like people shared music, and the music companies didn't like that, so they eventually got to shutting Napster down because it was centralized. There was a centralized group running it. But then you started to see more peer-to-peer sort of decentralized networks come about with the same technology. So I remember growing up, I'm not afraid to say it, using free file sharing software like Kazaa or LimeWire. You might have heard that. And it was because it was peer-to-peer. That's why it couldn't be shut down or stopped. And so then I gradually got introduced to torrents, which is large file sharing. So if you wanted to share movies, tons of books, that's your place to go with torrents. And I've learned so much from torrents. Like I wouldn't know what I know today without torrents, to be honest. And it's basically just people freely sharing what they have. And because it's peer-to-peer, it was distributed, decentralized, it's still around to this day. So there's a lot of different versions of torrent networks as well. There's not just one, because sort of similar to Napster, there's this one called Pirate Bay.
Yeah.
It was the #1 place to go to download torrents, but that got shut down because once again it was like a centralized place, and they eventually found out through tracing the IP addresses and whatever who ran it. But now there's other alternatives because people just use the same technology, the same software, and started running their own network, and it's the peers that make it. So yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sorry. Yeah.
I was wondering, like, what's like a career path to go down, if there is one, to work on blockchain technology? Like, what's the next thing for people coming up who want to make a career of this to work on? Obviously, it's an opinion because I know it's so new.
Yeah.
But
It's a really good question. The only reason why I'm kind of hesitating is because I'm so on the other end of the spectrum that I couldn't give you an answer that a developer might. Do you want to?
Yeah, it really depends on what area you're going into. Because what happens with the blockchain, these people are blocked because there's two different things. There's cryptocurrency and there's also blockchain. So when you go into blockchain, there's also technologies that are associated with that. So it's really, when you ask questions, really broad range. Because when you talk about blockchain, there's also a business aspect to it, and there's also a develop aspect to it, and there's other perspectives. So it really depends on what aspect you're looking from. Is it from a fintech, from a developer area, from financial?
I just want to know what's happening.
Pardon?
I'm not sure exactly. I just want to know.
So is this pretty much, it's a broad question. It's just saying that if I want to get into business, what field should I get into? Because it's really incorporating so many things, because at the end of the day, blockchain will be used by governments, by all societies. So really, it's from what perspective or what industry that you're trying to get into that it is. Because at the end of the day, are you a programmer, or are you really into sales or business? It's really from that perspective rather than just a broad thing of what is blockchain, how to get
Would
into.
you say you're the other side of the spectrum?
Oh, I'm completely on the educational side. So I stood back. I actually used to play professional soccer till I got injured 8 years ago now. And I found out about Bitcoin right at that time. So I immediately started looking into it, and then I knew I was going to stick around. So that actually became, I knew at that time, my career path, because it was something I could study from the sidelines over the years, and then in time I can kind of help people with it. And that's the job I have now. I work for a Bitcoin wallet company where I help people with the problems they have with that Bitcoin wallet. If I didn't do the research over the years, I wouldn't have enough experience to even get the job, never mind help people. So it was fortunate timing that I ran into the job offer, but I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't start looking into it. So it was just the general information that I was looking at, the concepts. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the concepts And I never got into the technical, dirty, under the hood aspects because I knew that's what the developers were gonna be for. Like, I knew my strengths and I knew my weaknesses. So I figured, okay, if I know enough that I can just kind of talk about it, like I'm confident answering questions and just talking about the network and other cryptocurrencies, I know that'll be valuable sometimes. So even I've seen jobs come up where there's Bitcoin ATM companies where they need a rep to kind of promote their ATMs. And it's not really promoting their ATMs, you're answering questions in general about Bitcoin, but at the same time you would say, okay, here's how our ATMs function and this is how you use it. But you still have to know how Bitcoin works and the network works, the blockchain works in general in order to get that job. So even before I got the job for the Bitcoin wallet company, I was doing something part-time where I would go on a forum, a Bitcoin forum, and I would kind of, it's called Bitcoin shilling, which is basically just promoting Bitcoin with an account, and I would get paid for it depending on the amount of posts I did under that account, and I would get paid in Bitcoin. So I only was able to do that and get paid because I was confident enough and he could see that I knew what I was talking about just from the typing and what I said. So it's really, you just have to kind of figure out what your strengths are and your weaknesses are. But the beauty of Bitcoin and the blockchain is I think there'll be a spot for everyone. Like, you're building a whole new system again. So it's really where you see yourself fitting in best. But the whole thing about this organization is to kind of get the best people in the community to kind of put their heads together and kind of maybe form our own organization or kind of network, just somewhere to build, like it's just a spot to build off of. But I've found over the years it's way more easier doing something well in this space if you're able to collaborate and connect with other like-minded individuals and organizations. If you can do that, you're gonna win long-term for sure. If you're just trying to compete and be your own thing right off the bat, sure you might help out right away, but in the long term, will you still be there? Will people still trust your brand and things like that? So I'm just trying to focus on basic
So
stuff.
you recommend buying Bitcoins?
Yeah. Every chance I get, I buy Bitcoins. And
So you said you work for wallet provider? What?
yeah, so the wallet provider. So there's Bitcoin wallet companies. And this one I actually was promoting selflessly, like by myself. I was on Twitter, hey, this is the best Bitcoin wallet company, yada, yada, yada. And then I saw on Twitter they put out an ad, they were hiring somebody, and I responded. I said, like, can I work remotely, and is it customer support related? Because if it had anything to do with developing, I wouldn't be able to do it. But I had done enough sales since I got back from playing soccer. I was confident I could help people and do customer service. I did that too. So that's how it started, and they just needed someone for customer support and quality assurance. So testing the new upgrades for the app and stuff like that, and that's all stuff I can do sitting at my computer. So it was it just happened through that. But
So how they make money? When we do transaction?
it's actually through donations, and yeah, through this. There's this one feature called Ricochet, which it's a privacy feature, but it does have a premium fee involved. But they're completely open about it. It's just literally through donations and that premium feature that they make money, and they've been living on straight Bitcoin since 2013, since through people's donations, and that's how I've been able to get paid through their donations that they got. And it's crazy, like someone over the winter donated 1 Bitcoin to them, and it's just because they're building something that people want. But yeah.
This wallet, you can only hold Bitcoin though, right? And most wallets, you can only hold Bitcoin.
Yes, most wallets you can only hold Bitcoin. Now, there are way more wallets available on Android than iPhone. I'll tell you that for sure. The reason is because Apple, they only let you do a certain amount of features without jailbreaking the device. So Android, like for example, our wallet, we have Android. Everybody loves the features on the Android APK, so the app. we're gonna be releasing an iOS version, but it's not gonna have the same features, not at all. But there's so many iOS users that people are literally just constantly asking for it. So whatever, we're gonna provide an iOS app, but it's not gonna have the same features as an Android. But with that being said, there's still lots of free options. Like, do you have an iPhone?
No, but you were mentioning that instead of an exchange, you should have a wallet. But my only thing with wallets is that you can only hold Bitcoin, right? So if you're into like altcoins and stuff, then you basically have to use an exchange.
Yes. Okay, so you bring up a good point. There aren't that many wallets for altcoins. I don't want to get into like why that is, but it's sort of similar to Apple versus Android. There's only a certain amount, like people want to build on Android because it has that long-term potential. The developers want to build on Android because it's their long-term. They're building Bitcoin wallets, more Bitcoin wallets versus altcoin wallets because there's more long-term potential there. But that doesn't say there aren't altcoin wallets. Like for your desktop, Exodus, EXODUS, is a fantastic wallet to manage cryptocurrencies, but at the same time, it's not all the cryptocurrencies that are out there. It's like the more popular ones that these wallet providers have. There's another one called Jax. I wouldn't recommend, but there's an altcoin wallet as well. There's one altcoin wallet I recommend called Coinomi, Coin-O-M-I. And they actually just released an iOS app as well, so you can find them on iOS as well. But that's the best wallet. They're open source as well that I would recommend that you could hold altcoins with. But yeah, you're right. With altcoins, majority of the time you're having to use exchanges to kind of hold your other cryptocurrencies, but there's only a few wallet providers that can hold other altcoins with, so you just have to keep that in mind. No problem. Any other question?
So are you from Brampton, or which area are you from?
Yeah, I actually grew up in Brampton.
Oh, okay, so you work within the area, like you deal with all transactions and currencies of different exchanges?
No,
Or-
so I work for a Bitcoin wallet company, which is just to hold Bitcoins, to send and receive them, you have to have a Bitcoin wallet. So it's separate from the exchanges. It's basically just a way to hold and save your Bitcoin, like send and receive them. So if you go on your iPhone or Android, you type in Bitcoin wallet, you'll see different providers. I just work for a certain provider, and I work remotely from home. So the developers are actually in France, and like the guy who runs it all is in London. So
Okay. I have to look it up, I haven't really researched.
that's okay. But yeah, I grew up in Brampton, and I recently came back. Like I spent time traveling, playing soccer. Like I went to school in the States, and then when I came back from there, I was living on my own in different parts in Toronto and the GTA, like living by myself, just renting different places on Kijiji. But now I have a girlfriend, we settled down in Brampton, and I've always wanted to come back to Brampton. It's not a popular opinion, but I think there's a lot of talent in Brampton, and there's so many different people from different parts of the world that I've met so many great people and learned so many different things. I honestly wouldn't want to live any other place long term. I do love Brampton. Well, not a lot of people seem to think that these days.
You know, because I always see there's like a forum on in the library, it's always about the Bitcoin, so that's why
Yeah.
cryptocurrency, so I was kind of curious about it, so
Cool.
now I know.
There you go.
I didn't even know there was a wallet company. Didn't even know it existed.
It's okay, that's why we're here, right? Just to talk about the stuff that's happening in the crypto space, because it's new and it's happening so fast. I think it's best if we meet people within the community and just kind of share ideas about it. So that's why I started these meetups, and I was telling them earlier the library is helping me provide a space. So there's this lady, Katrina Doctor, who's really helping me out with all this. Nice. it out here before 5 o'clock today.
I got a
Usually all
question.
the other ones ran until 5.
Like in terms of like adoption, because in my head, I think like adoption of the stuff rather than just, let's say, like, you know, like, I think the pretty much incentive of people right now is pretty much buy Bitcoin, praying to go bit longer for monetary gains, which that's perfectly fine because every player on the network is about monetary gains, right? Now, obviously, let's say adoption of this type of technology is probably more important. Let's say like, you know, peer-to-peer transaction, because if that the volume that goes on more, like obviously the network is stronger. And what do you see on that, like in the future for the adoption? Because right now, like, you know, the transaction fee is crazy still, right? People are pretty much just holding.
Right, and so that's what I was touching on earlier. I naturally see it progressing, starting with the store of value, and then
Right.
moving into medium of exchange and unit of account. The reason why it has to go through that process, like first store of value, is just how the network is built and how it's going to progress. So you bring up a good point, and that's actually why a lot of altcoins are seeing success right now,
Right.
because